All right, welcome back to Adelante Chicago. We've all heard how the demographics are changing with Latinos making up a big part of the community, not just here in Chicago, but just about everywhere you go in the country. Well, for many, the question has become, how do you do some cross-cultural marketing? Ozzie Godinez owns Paco Collective. He's here with more on how to market to this changing community. And I always say it's not just about marketing to the Latino community, but you also don't want to leave people out, right? You don't want to leave the other groups out of the picture, I think. And so that's what's so important.
Right. It is. I think when you're talking about marketing in general, so you have to understand who you're talking to, right? So as it relates to the Hispanic marketing, we look at the numbers specifically from, what happened between 2000 and 2010, right? The census. And it was an eye-opener for many brands. The Latino population in the U.S. basically increased by 43%, and so did Asian, by the way. So the makeup of the U.S. Latin or the U.S. population as a whole is very different. The interesting thing with that is that, despite the popular narrative on immigration, right? So it wasn't immigration that drove those numbers. In particular, it's actually natural childbirth. So it's Latinos having more babies, essentially, right? So that drove a significant portion of the increase in population. And then these births, these kids that are growing up in the best of both worlds.
They're like the Latino millennials, right?
Latino millennials, yes. Interestingly enough, there's a statistic, Pew has this, 43% of all current millennials are non-white, which is a staggering statistic when you
43%
think of current.
Of that percentage, how many are Latinos?
A significant portion are Latinos, right? And so as a marketer, you have to sort of understand the changing landscape and preferences and all of those things. And there are actually what we would consider three game-changing dynamics that are happening in the marketplace. The first one is called ethnic fluidity. And ethnic fluidity is basically this notion that I am multiple races, but I am also one, right? So I'll give you a very specific example. My son, his mom is Filipino, I am Mexican, he was born here, so he's American. When he's with his Latino friends, he is Latino, soy de Mexico, I'm Mexican. When he is with his Filipino friends, he's Filipino. When he's in school, he's American.
Right.
Exactly, and he's all of those things, and we can't deny one or the other. That's ethnic fluidity. You can flow in and out of culturally who he feels most comfortable with in that context, right? The other thing is reverse assimilation. This one's really interesting. You're going to know. It sounds really fancy, but reverse assimilation is the minority mainstream or the minority populations basically not infecting. That's probably affecting the broader mainstream. I'll give you an example. Sriracha. You didn't see sriracha in most menus 5 years ago, right?
The hot sauce.
The hot sauce. Now it's
everywhere.
It's everywhere. The other one that I see all the time is aguacate, avocado, or guacamole. You didn't see that on a Subway menu 5 years ago, and now you do. And there's countless examples of those.
We're working our way into the culture,
right, and it's basically the minority groups affecting or really infusing cultural nuances.
I just talked about this Latinicity that just opened up over at Block 37. So that's a perfect example.
It's a perfect example. The other one that I like to share, this one's funny, is and this has happened very recently. Went to a birthday party, my daughter's friend, white, and what do they have as the sort of highlight of the day for the birthday party?
Piñata.
A piñata, right?
I used to love those as a kid, so I'm excited.
Right, but again, that's the Hispanic culture, basically infusing themselves into the broader mainstream, and you're seeing a ton of that. Okay. The third one is retroculturation. Retroculturation is that notion that most of those Latinos and Asians and other ethnic groups that have predominantly been Americanized, going back to their roots, and really understanding embracing relearning or learning actually for the first time Spanish or any other language, embracing all those cultural traditions, quinceañeras, those things that really are part of who you are. And so those three things, and those are game changers that are happening. Assimilation used to be a linear path where you come to a country, you adopt all of what it means to be American, and you become very Americanized. For Latinos specifically, that's not happening. They're living in the best of both worlds, really, and you're embracing both things. And you see it in television, you see it in music, and sort of the infusion and proliferation, really, of Latino and Spanish language music across the board.
Okay. So the question becomes, how do you then market?
Right.
So when we're talking about, let's say, a commercial, and
Right.
we've seen it over and over again with like the Super Bowl, for example, we started to see a few years ago. It wasn't just a commercial about Latinos, it was a commercial where they actually spoke Spanish.
It was in Spanish.
And it was in Spanish, right?
Yeah.
Is that effective? I mean, is that the road that we're going down?
That's one of the ways, right? So I think it's really understanding who you're talking to, or understanding the Hispanic, the Latino in the U.S., because we're not all the same. There's, like in general market, there is Gen Xers, and we have all these fancy names, by the way. Gen X, Millennial, and then Gen Y, which
Yeah.
is coming up, or Gen Z. I think it's truly understanding who you're talking to and understanding the media that best resonates. So in that particular example, yeah, it works because Latinos, you're seeing more Latinos watching the Super Bowl. Exactly, so
Right.
it made sense.
So it made sense. One real quick question. I think I've got 30 seconds
Yep.
left. When it comes to politics, we see the presidential election coming up, the candidates, they want to target the Latino community. I think they said for somebody to win, they've got to win 45% of the
Right.
Latino vote.
Right.
So what do they do? I mean, is doing a commercial in Spanish, is that enough for them?
I think that is important, but I think it's understanding the value system that Latinos really what's
Embrace, and it's
embrace and
important
what's
to them.
important to them, and how that relates to the broader picture from a politics or political standpoint. I don't think any candidate is doing a really good job. They're just taking their English language message and translating it, and really not thinking through the value system, and that's critical to reaching Latinos.
So you've got something to teach to each one of the candidates out there.
We do.
They're not doing it right? All right. Thank you so much,
Well, thank you.
Ozzie Godinez, for coming in.
This was awesome.
Good program. I'm glad you came in.
Thank you.
All right.